I'm like, oh, that's my boyfriend's phone. I'm like, hold on, who sent him a text like, what you doing at 3 in the morning? I'm like, I hate to be that girl.
Hey love, I haven't forgotten about you. Sipping on my vodka, I call to simply say I'm still your baby.
What's poppin' YouTube? This is your boy Therese, and before we begin, please like, share, and hit the subscribe button for more content.
There you go. I was sitting. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly fine. Okay. So, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How are you this evening?
I'm doing awesome. First of all, I want to thank you for doing this because I got bored one night and I just wanted to really have a place for everyone to really have a place to kind of tell their journeys and stories. And I remember me being as a kid, I felt like in so many ways that people just didn't care about certain things. And I'd rather shine a light on those things that people actually really should care about, that means a lot to us. One of those things is just like, what are your dreams? Not what people push you to do and all that craziness.
I want to start off by thanking you for having me. And to start off, my name is Amore. I am 30, turning 31 next month as well. December babies. Hey.
What?
My current job is at the museum in Portsmouth. And what I do on the side, I am an artist. I've worked on quite a bit as far as makeup goes and creating my own wigs before I got the job because I didn't have any money. I just had to use my resources and
So you create your own?
Not anymore. That was like really.
Oh, you toss out the window now that you got the money for it.
I joked with my friend, my close friends, like, unless someone wants to pay me for that, because that is a really time-consuming process at all. I do wigs, makeup, photography. I was known for the photography for the better part of my 20s because that was what I honed in on, and then got interested in makeup and wigs. And I've always been into fashion, even as a kid, and just growing up and seeing the likes of Naomi Campbell, Iman, and Tyra Banks at the time. And there were like a plethora of other models, but that was my holy trinity, if you will, because I'm like, oh, sweet, they look like us.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a kid, I always kind of question, like, looking at fashion magazines, like, okay, I'm excited to see these three, but whenever I walk down the street, I'm seeing lots of other Black people, so I would kind of question that.
First question first. How do you identify?
Trans woman.
That's male transing to a female, because not many people understand that. And to make it clear for people that wouldn't. Growing up, one thing that I always hated is how people would take and be like, how can that guy be a top and he's feminine, or that why is the bottom a masculine? Like, so those are four different things. And I hate when people do the crossing, and because it does nothing but cause more confusion and stupid arguments that shouldn't even take place. And so that's just how you identify yourself. So as far as your sexuality, because that's a different definition, that's a different word. What is your sexuality?
Like, I'm more leaning towards like pansexuality.
Mm-hmm.
Just where like the gender preference doesn't matter to you as much, but I find myself more attracted to like masculine features. So
Okay.
say I'll date like a cisgendered man or a trans man, and at times like even a cisgendered woman, if she looks a bit more masculine. I've never been on a date with like a cisgendered woman, but I feel like if the opportunity arose, I don't think I would be like bothered by it that much. But pretty much all my life, I've just been with like guy.
This is a conversation that I'm happy to have gotten a lot earlier doing this, because seriously, so people can fully understand, hear your testimony, hear your story, because anybody can sit up here and assume any damn thing. I'll just put it out there how the four differences between masculine, feminine, and top, bottom. But I like the fact it just gives us an opportunity to actually hear you actually put it in perspective. So it just makes sense, because you're a trans woman and you still have the heart and an attraction for anyone. It's just it's just at the end of the day, it's the more masculine features that you are attracted to. And so it can still be with a woman, but it's just how she carry herself, and that if it would attract you or not. Hopefully I summed that up or put it in a good way, because I love that. I love it because it doesn't really close anyone off. One way is just saying, this is me as a person, and this is what I'm attracted to. So
being closeted to me is like not ready to share with whomever, whether it's the world or at work, friends or family. That's what to me, that's what it feels like. Just not ready to like be open with who you are.
What age were you when you first started having any type of different emotions?
Okay. Goodness, what a journey has been, honestly. I can't remember how old I was, but I know I was super young. I want to say between 3 or 6. I would love wearing like my mom's nightgown and such, and her heels, and wanting to like play with the lipstick and such. And you know how a lot of parents are, it's like, oh, it's just a phase, it's just a phase, they'll grow out of it. Here I am. But that's when I first realized it. And then like things that boys in school wanted to do, I didn't find myself that interested in it. So I would hang out with like a lot of the girls. Forgive me, I'm gonna put my phone on silent. I'm being all unprofessional.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I just yelled at my dog. Pause for a second. Go. Dog, you're fine.
I got you. Um, I really wouldn't be interested in like roughhousing and such. I just would hang out with a lot of the girls in school. And again, another thing where it's like parents, oh, my child is such a ladies' man and such. And it's like me thinking back now, like, oh no, I'm one of the ladies. What you talking about? I would always hang out with girls, and that was when I was still super young, and we were in South Carolina, my birth state. Then when we moved to Virginia, I don't know, I just picked up on people's vibe, if you will, really quickly, even at a young age. And first we lived in Chesapeake, then in Norfolk Park Place. Whew, I definitely was not coming out at that time. I do recall like one time, like maybe 8, fast forward to 8, or like in between 8 and 10, I was just not feeling like myself for some odd reason. And I just remember like after school that day, I was just like getting the bath water running so I could take a bath for the night. And I'm like, I guess I'm a boy. And I just, while I was sitting in the bathtub, I remember like looking down like, okay, I guess I'm a boy. I don't know. It just didn't feel like me and such. And that's one of the earliest, well, one another milestone for me where I'm like, huh, am I what I am? Not sure if that makes sense, but it just like, am I what like everyone around me is saying like, oh, you're this, you're this, you're this. And I won't lie, for a hot minute, like honestly, like most of my life just kind of conflicted and such with who am I really and what people are saying I am. And fast forward to high school, sophomore or junior year, I'm leaning more towards junior year where people were kind of in school were like, you're dressing kind of odd and such. And thanks to like some influences of like my close friends whom I still have today, thankfully, uh, just making me feel like more open and free to be who I am. And during my senior year, I just remember like, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to do me and such, even though like I was battling like a lot at home and within my own self, like just trying to have like fashion be my escape and such,
Mhm.
but just still feeling stressed out.
So
And
it's been a passion of yours clearly since like 3, 4 years old.
yeah, yeah. And I know like I probably gave my parents a heart attack, well, attack when like how I would dress. And it's like those pants are really, really tight. And I was just joking with one of my close friends about this evening, where it's like when I finally moved out at my last apartment before moving back home with family right now. Uh, I came home for the holidays to hang out, and my outfits like those pants are really tight. I'm like, I'm going to be petty this time. I'm like, remember how when I was in high school, you said when I'm paying grown people bills and got my own place, I can wear what I want. And my mom just shut up. And I'm like,
You already see where I'm going with this, but as long as you got the hint.
oh, yeah. At those times earlier in my life, more so in high school, I identified as a gay guy. And a part of me, like, due to like survival essentially and just seeing how the world is, and if I can backtrack now that I'm thinking about it, I remember as a kid, like before Zoom, YouTube, and all this other stuff were a thing, and even way before MySpace, I remember like looking at forums and such, and like always loved learning. Not not much has changed today. I still just enjoy like learning about stuff and just seeing like, oh, what is gay and such, or with the likes of RuPaul, like on VH1 with the RuPaul show, and uh during that time period, the mid to late 90s, I'm like, okay, this person isn't a woman, but they're a man. So I was just like so curious and wanted to educate myself. And uh coming back to closer to the present time that we're in my early 20s, one of my friends at that time identified at that time as genderqueer, and I'm like, huh, what does that mean? And they just told me like, look it up and look up what trans is. You might know something about yourself. And I'm like, later that day when I got back home, I'm just like learning a bunch of stuff. I'm like, oh wow, this makes sense to how I thought and how I acted as a kid and such. And I decided to like, after a year or so, when I was 23 at that time, like, okay, let's be open and honest with my family and share this news with them, because they knew that I was gay in high school. Um, I just shared it with them, and I'm like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And it's like, whew, it
Like it was an easy
was.
transition with them. Like they didn't mind at all, and it was cool.
I, I had quite a bit of a talk where it's like, no child of mine is going to be doing X, Y, Z under our roof, and we're not funding this and such. And it's like, I wasn't going to ask for a handout and whatnot. And that was when I was early on, like learning how to do makeup and such. And
So this
just some of the,
from the age of when you were younger and you were, dressing up, and they were just passing it off as a phase. I was, I don't mind being wrong. So I they passed it off as a phase as an early age, but did they ever like just turn away from it completely and just say, you know, because for you to even have to come out later on?
mm, more so my mom, she felt it for a while from what she told me. Like, okay, my child is in like growing out of this particular thing and whatnot. And my mom, she kind of already knew for a hot minute. And when I came out, I guess it was just like, okay, whoa, this is maybe that was the feeling like, okay, whoa, this is a lie and such. And them to like staying up to date on the happenings when it comes to like trans women and especially trans women of color and whatnot. And they just don't want anything to happen to me. And I'm like, I'm well aware of what's going on. I don't want nothing to happen to me either. And when it comes to like being a part of the community, like LGBTQ plus community, I really don't socialize with a lot of the people, honestly. And I feel like a large part of that is due to like how my upbringing was, where it's like, okay, in certain parts of my life, certain people should have been there for me, but I'm like, if these people weren't there for me, who can I trust essentially for a while? And that, and also just my experience with some people in the community in high school and how like a bunch of crazy rumors are spread about me. And in high school, it's like, oh gosh, yes, it's not okay, but it's given that teenagers, kids are going to talk and such. But just to a certain extent, it's like, all right, I'm just going to shut myself off from a large group of people and all. But I would still like be cordial with everybody. And like, if someone spoke to me, like, hey, hey, how you doing and such, I'm not going to be fake about it. But if it's like someone that I don't like, I don't know, like you were saying earlier, I wanted to bring like that positivity to all people, even if they did do me wrong and such. I'm just like, I'm just like, hey, kind of thing. Like, I'm gonna see you from a distance.
Wait, I want to do it on this side. I see you. Okay. Well, I'm weak. What was the situation that led up to you coming out to your parents? Was it at the same time?
um, in my early 20s, yes, I came out to them at that time about being trans. I didn't start the transition till this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like this year, reason for that long period is because I guess a part of me, I was afraid to start transitioning because of the nature of my job and hearing still and present during that time period in my 20s and such. I'm like, I'm afraid to lose my job. I don't want to like have to resort to other methods and such as like so many have done. thankfully, that hasn't been my story.
My heart seriously goes out to anyone that's going through this journey. It's just the security that the natural security in certain things that other people get that we would immediately think, like, if we're going down this journey, that what part of our livelihood is going to be threatened. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a scary thing to really think about, especially again when you're just trying to live. But it's like, how much do you really got to pay to live? Not being able to just be you and then try to live up to what society is trying to tell you who you have to be to stay here. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I think, like, it. I'm one of those people that really try, like you said, I try to stay thinking positive things, but when you do that and you try to only put yourself in positive places, you cheat yourself out of growing, you cheat yourself out of learning what's really going on in the world and learning that there are screwed up things going on every day that somebody might need one person on their side to say, bitch, this is wrong. So when I stop allowing myself to live in that bubble, I have exes that did not get jobs just because of how they may have communicated. Like how a country person, they have an accent, but they're often can be deemed as ghetto. And so I'm one of those people, if you let one little seed grow in my head, it will branch off into so many different things. And so it branched off into eventually thinking about, well, if people are being discriminated just from how they speak, what about people that are going through this? Or what about people that are going through that? And so it is very hurtful and it scares you because there are other resorts that people end up having to sadly take. I'm sorry. I went on a rant.
No,
But
you're completely.
that's one of the, I'm happy that you did, because I wasn't thinking about that initially when we were having a conversation, again, because I'm just thinking on a tell your story. And I'm happy that you highlighted that's something that you were concerned about.
Yes. And I'm just like, I enjoy my job most of the time. And I'm like, I don't want to lose that job security and such. And at the time, I'm like, before moving out my parents' house the first time, I'm like, I need to figure something out because I want to live my truth and such. And if I can't do it here, um, I just need to get out and such. And
I feel like in so many ways and things, like some things are almost even down to the conditions of how we live, certain things can be like in a push almost of enslavement, of pushing you to actually being a different way. You know what I'm saying? Just as much as you're like, because at the end of the day, right now at this moment, you're just wanting to live your life. You're wanting to be free. You just want to live on your own, to live like any lottie dottie and everybody living. And it, when you're in that mindset of, okay, well, this is I can't really live my truth under this roof. So I have to go get my own, but will I be able to still be able to maintain? Like, it's almost like a pushback of the enslavement. It's like almost, you be damned if you go out there and do what you really want to do and be who you are and just live your life. And then you got to have somebody, nope. And then you're like, oh shit, wait, now I don't have a job. But then if you stay under the roof, you don't get to live your truth. And so that's the point of honestly doing this video again, to show even the mentality that we go through as human beings, because that's what the fuck we are. And like how people just don't honestly think about what they're doing to other people and not taking consideration that they are dealing with another person. So I'm I hate that you went through it, but I love that you're expressing your story.
Thank you. With that mentality in my mind for a while before moving out, and also something I looked into like last year, since we had nothing but time. I wasn't at work for a hot minute. I looked into like psychological type of things, and one video was like about your love style and such, and it mostly stems from like your upbringing and what you experienced as a child. And when I finally moved out, I was like in a serious relationship for close to a year at that point, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so nice. And he's like, hey, we should move in together. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really nice and such. And I didn't pay attention to the red flags before we moved in, but when we finally moved in, it's like, I don't know, it just felt magical. And then as time went on, this was
The honeymoon
toward,
wore off.
yeah. This was like in my late 20s, like 27 to 28, and things just got really tumultuous where I'm just like, I would wake up early some mornings, like on my days off, and just like go to the other room to like try and work out a little bit, like just doing sit-ups or lifting like light weights and whatnot. And the beginning of like the craziness, when I thought it was my phone, like on the little cushion I was working out on, I just heard it buzz. I'm like, oh, let me, before I work out, let's see what my friend said. And I'm like, oh, that's my boyfriend's phone. I'm like, hold on, who sent him a text like, what you doing at 3 in the morning? I'm like, I hate to be that girl, but I just looked and I'm like, oh my gosh, how long has this been going on? And crazy enough, it happened on the morning of his birthday where I was putting money aside for us to do something exciting together. And I he was still asleep, but I'm like, I want to talk about this now. So I just like talked to him, and then yeah, I decided to stay like a crazy woman. And it was just like a lot of stuff that just kept on piling. And finally, I'm just like, I need to go. I need to get away from this whole situation. My parents offered me to stay there with them. And I'm like, maybe for a little bit, but still keeping it in mind, like, okay, how things were when I was growing up, and even as a young adult after graduating high school. I'm gonna figure something out. And I did stay with them like on and off for a couple of weeks, and then I was able to find like myself an apartment and moved back here to Portsmouth. I was in Smithfield at the time with the guy, and we didn't speak for like several months, and then he contacted me, even though like I was told like, hey girl, you should block his number, you should block his number. And I'm like, oh no, time heals us. And you know, I pulled out my clown nose and my clown, I shouldn't sound like that, but I gave him a second chance. Things didn't work out. And the reason I brought up like the psychological videos I've watched and like your love styles, whew, um, yeah, with that relationship, things did get like really out of hand, not just with infidelity, but also like emotional abuse as well as other forms of that. And I'm like, that was the first time around. And then the second time around, I'm like, okay, these were the main issues that we had when we were in the first, like the relationship the first time. And as far as the upbringing, like the similarities with my upbringing and that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Me just sticking around, even though he's like throwing phones at the wall and punching stuff, or like punching the glass, and him throwing dishes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I did not want. And then the second time around, a little bit of the same stuff, but it wasn't like a place in his name. So thankfully, there were no broken walls, but there were like some really terrible arguments. And
Isn't that funny how the name on the lease can change a motherfucker from punching the wall?
all I know, no more. If they like start bugging up and like ready to punch something, it's like, no, gotta go. um, I'm not proud of it, but the second time around, like when the cheating happened again, I swung on him quite a few times, and I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, just how you feel emotionally? Like, always in my towards my mid 20s, and even more so now, but starting in my mid 20s, I started feeling confident in myself. And at that time, I felt confident, but I'm just like, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? And it did break that confidence in me. I'm like, dang, what's going on with me then? Where you keep doing this?
You immediately start blaming yourself, and you shouldn't have thought about that at all. You should have started thinking about, wait. This person is broken and they're looking for something. Like at the end of the day, first of all, know that you can only give all you can give. And I think sadly, this sad truth is that people don't talk anymore. People don't communicate anymore. People don't express how they feel anymore. And except through anger and throwing tantrums, and ended up in jail and losing everything. But I feel like it's just something as simple as saying, hey, babe, I want something more, blah, blah, blah. Just communicating with you so you can kind of be on the track of, no, or, okay, let's do it. Or you go do it and I'm going to do me. So, like, this was the last you guys were together?
As far as relationship wise, yes.
So y'all still good?
I No, I had to
Okay.
cut off all connection, honestly. Like,
Okay.
blocked his number. Well, I don't know how many numbers I blocked at this point. And I'm like, do I need to change my number or something? Because it's been like a couple of months, maybe a month or two since he last tried to contact me, to my knowledge. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm not going back. That was insane. I'm not doing it again.
Did you deal with homophobia a lot growing up?
Middle school, I do recall sometimes where it's like, oh, you're they're gay and such. And it was like a weird thing. Like in middle school, I had to be in seventh grade twice because I didn't do so good the first year. We were still in Park Place at that time. This was 2003, 2004, I believe. Sometime in that school year, I had like what was called nervous tics, and then I went to get diagnosed, and lo and behold, your girl got Tourette's. Um, Thankfully, it's not as bad as it was like in middle school, or say my senior year in high school, where I was like really stressed out. But I remember like a couple of guys laughed about it and said, oh, when you twitch like that, that means you're gay. And looking back on it, I'm like, really?
The stupid things that people just attach to being gay, and it's like, okay, then what if you start ticking?
Yeah. I feel like a lot of the homophobia came towards me a lot during high school, and especially during my junior year. I did get like some comments, and I just like taking a like relaxed approach to it, just not addressing those people. And it's like, child, whatever, okay, I'm gay, what's new? And then during my senior year, like due to constant like things being said, not just to me, but my close friends and such, and I just got fed up with it. And I'm like, no, fuck it. Do you mind if I cuss?
You good? Have
Okay.
fun.
I'm like, fuck it. I'm clapping back at people. And I remember there was one time, it was St. Patrick's Day, because I remember wearing a ridiculously big green hat that day. And I was sitting with one of my friends, like sitting at a different table for once during lunch, because I'm like, oh, we need like, I was in a theater drama club and such. And I'm like, hey, I want to go over these lines because after this lunch period, we got to be in that class. And as we're talking, I hear like a guy across the table, like, I don't feel comfortable with that sitting over here. And I'm like, excuse me, you said what? And him talking indirectly to me, which still gets on my nerves. And it's like him talking to his homeboy. This guy was, I've always been small, but this wasn't no small guy. He's like, I don't feel comfortable with this sitting over here. And I'm like, just snatched the hat off and just slammed it on the table and stood up. I'm like, come on, say it. I'm right here as such. And I'm thinking back to that now. I'm like, dang, one of the few times I did like clap back in that manner and such back then, because I was more quiet than I am now back
Mhm.
then. But like, I'm about to drop this, you know what? I'm like, come on, drop this then. And my friend is like, girl, please sit your ass down. Like, the security guard over there is looking right at us. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm tired of everybody having to say this, that, and the third about me and my friends and such. And I think the thing that set me off that time is like a day or two. It was around that time. One of my close friends said that someone had like shoved them and such. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm just like, I will be damned if that happens to me and such, or happens to any of my other friends. Like, I want to nip this in the bud now. And after lunch, I'm like standing in the courtyard, and then my friend came out like late for lunch. It's like, girl, what is you doing standing out here by yourself? And I'm like, I'm waiting for him. And
You were waiting. You were waiting for him.
yes,
See,
I'm
you
like,
ready?
I want to see this happen, but
You were ready. You were fed up with
thankfully not.
it.
Thankfully, he's not come out there because I was not trying to repeat 12th grade, and we were close to the finish line. I'm like,
Yeah.
what was my ass doing at that time? And there was another instance where, again, my senior year, it was outside of school. Um, always loved wearing high socks. A couple of my close friends that I still keep in touch with now would wear them. Like the striped socks were really in at that time. Me and a couple of my friends are walking around in the mall, and I had like my custom couture, if you will, where I just like took my old clothes, shredded up the pants, and splattered paint on a shirt, and like, I'm killing the game today. And some guys like laughing at me, and it's like, look at that over there. And I'm like, look at your fucked up ed job. And then his friends like, oh, and he's like, yo, I'm I'm about to fight. I'm about to drop them. And I'm like, I thought we were just joking each other. Like, I don't know this guy. I ain't know who this guy was, but I'm just like, that's weird. Now that the shoe's on the other foot and you ain't got nothing to
Because
clap
it's always
back.
fun to poke and throw rocks at other people and hurt them. But the moment when motherfuckers pick that same rock up and throw it at your head and it hit your fucking eye, and then you want to run and say that somebody did something to you, I wouldn't have fucking bothered you unless you bothered me.
Right.
That's
Nowadays, like my tongue is definitely lethal. I'm like, I try and reel it back because I'm like, I gotta keep my job and I wanna like have a certain image and not like, child, I said she done cussed me out the other day. And it's like, I don't wanna have that reputation, but at times I'm like, should I leave this person out? No, no, no. Let's not think like that. I'm like, okay, I hear you. It's whenever someone has something slick to say, I'm like, mm, I understand that I'm perfect at it because there have been like numerous times where it's like, well, this about you. And it's like, oh my God.
what does being out to you mean?
Being out to me is like happiness, if you will. Like,
You lit up as soon as you thought about it. As soon as you thought about what the definition meant to you, you lit up.
I, I just lately, and since I'm like back home with my family for the time being and being out, I just feel alive and feel like, okay, y'all know, y'all see. Now let's move on and like I've always been a creative person, as I said at the beginning of the call, and a part of me just kind of held back for so long because I'm like, I did like behind the scenes work for a few short films and using before like transitioning and using my former name and such. And I'm just like, darn, I don't want to like do more projects like that where I'll be up on IMDb and it's like, hold up, wait, are you or are you this or are you Isa? And it's like I just held back for way too long and I'm just like, I feel free and all. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready to get back on the grind and like get my name out there as an artist and get these businesses out and such because I always have a lot of ideas. And that's what being out means to me, just happiness and I don't know, I can't think of any other word other than that.
As long as it continues to bring the smile that you have on your face right now, that's what's beautiful, seriously, because hearing a little piece of what you were going through at home at first versus how it is now, it's like, oh, that's a big difference. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Think about the you that felt trapped back that time. What would you go back to tell yourself that were going through the confusion and trying to search to get to where you are now?
I would definitely let younger me know that they are valuable and they will find somebody that loves them for them and find their chosen family one day and just hang in there and be strong and know that you are aware of what you're experiencing and it's valid. What you feel is valid and what you say is valid. Take your time and remember why you're doing this.
And why are you doing this?
Not just for me, but the countless people that feel the same way that you felt. And also seeing how you being you impacts people. I just remembered I work at the Children's Museum, and around Halloween time we have like what's called Museum Madness Day. The people that work there can dress up in a costume, and there were 2 years I went in with like a wig on and high heels on and such, and then people were like, "Oh wow, let me my child wants to take a picture with you," and such. And it's like, sure, there are times where it's like, oh my gosh, I just need some peace and quiet right now in that place. But I'm just like, let me try and remember those moments. And there was one year I was gonna like come decked out with makeup and hair and such, but I was told like, oh, you're gonna be in the costume and such. Like, eh, I don't want to put on makeup and then have to take it off and then have to take the wig off and then put it back on after like the one appearance for the mascot. So I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to wear this unicorn onesie that I have. And a mom came up to me and it's like, hey, my son wants to take a picture with you because he loves unicorns a lot. And he was scared to, like, nervous to come up to you. And because it's like a young black child, I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. I know like this is something that young me wanted to see growing up, like that representation and such. I'm like, I don't know what impact, like what full whole impact I may have on like the lives of these young children or even young adults and such. And it's like, oh wow. All right. Y'all can find me on Instagram. My art page is I Spy Isa. You can find me on YouTube and TikTok under I Spy TV. I will get on the ball with putting my gameplay uploads on to my YouTube channel and stay tuned for random funny things on my TikTok. Thank you so much for having me.
What does excuse my ugly voice that just came on. Yeah, once you leave the insanity, once you leave once you leave the asylum phase, yeah, make sure I say it right because my ass will say phrase in a heartbeat. It's me.
Okay.
I am sad because I don't know if what we just did recorded or not. So let's pause for a moment and fingers crossed. Because I hope that it paused. I'm gonna message you on Messenger because I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to stop some things real quick. But first of all, I really want to say I love your background. It's so nice. I love it. Like how you got it settled, even with the lighting. I love it. So as you see, I said, okay, let me figure out how can I get my little going on in my background. Because it was just gonna be a plain wall. If you see my first video, it was like, okay.